Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I'm Adam Lundy, and I am joined as always by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. But we're also joined by a special guest for the first time ever during a regular film discussion episode. We have a special guest with us, and that is a YouTube content creator, Crit. Welcome, everybody. How's things?
Hi,
Oh,
hi. It's nice to be here.
We're glad to have you. Obviously, regular listeners will know Chris was on and did an interview with Zach a little while ago. So, no stranger to the podcast. He's a returning face. But in case people didn't get a chance to listen to, your proper sort of one-on-one episode, Chris, do you want to just give a shout out to who you are, what you do, and where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a YouTuber, movie critic, talker kind of person. Um, I'm I'm there at Cryptic Productions. If you want to hear me have really bad opinions on your favorite films, that's where you'll find me. Also on Letterboxd under the same thing.
Awesome. I'll link everything in the description anyway, in case you don't want to have to try and write stuff down. Listeners will all be there anyway. Crit, we're very happy to have you for the next two episodes, I believe, if our schedules all align. But we're definitely glad to have you for this episode here anyway. At the end of our Ozploitation special, which would have been out a couple of weeks ago now at this stage, we kind of talked about what we're going to be talking about for the next two episodes. It's the first time ever we're essentially going to be running through an entire franchise, which I'm super excited about because it's my favorite franchise. So I was super happy that everybody agreed with this. Me and Zach got together to force Chris to watch Scream movies. So, of course, we're going to start with the original. Obviously, Scream came out in 1996, directed by Wes Craven. Just to give you the synopsis from Letterboxd, in case you've been living under a rock for the last nearly 30 years. A killer known as Ghostface begins killing off teenagers, and as the body count begins rising, one girl and her friends find themselves contemplating the rules of horror films as they find themselves living in a real life one. That's much too schmaltzy for what it actually is, I think. Maybe that's just me. I'm sorry, Chris, but we're gonna be going to you every time because I know you've seen this film, but you haven't seen any of the rest of them. But we're still gonna go to you every single time, I think.
yeah. As far as starting off.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things before, because I think well, I anticipate that we'll have slight disagreements on some of these things, but um I think Scream is okay. It's fun, it's cute. It's got, it's people kind of hamming it up and people trying to be funny and cute and very, very meta, movie about people that love movies. I probably feel similar to Scream as I do to Edgar Wright, but before I get into my opinion too much, I'm clearly in the minority here because They Shoot Zombies has this as the 35th best horror movie of all time.
And that's too low.
That's
That's
way too
Yeah,
way
that's
too
way
low.
too low.
That's way too low.
Yeah, it feels
I can't think
high,
of 34 better horror movies.
Yeah.
It's below Videodrome. So it's I mean above Videodrome, excuse me. So it's slightly higher than that. Movies like Peeping Tom, the original Hellraiser, King Kong. So it's in pretty good company. The Wicker Man is ahead of it, which is absolutely correct. The
Crazy.
Fly, Silence of the Lambs. It's whatever. So that's
Single
that.
company at least.
Yes. And then on They Shoot Pictures, which by the way, Crit, I don't know the extent that you know this, and it might be a good opportunity just to kind of remind everybody what we're talking about. Do you have a rough sense of why we're referencing They Shoot Pictures? Like, do you know what it is and kind of why we reference it?
I'm not completely in the loop. Um,
Yeah.
but the context kind of fills in clues. But if you'd like to explain, that would be nice.
Yeah. So they maybe 2006. So where are we at now? 17, 18 years ago. Um, they collected a list of about 6,000 critics. That list is now up to 13,000 critics, top lists, and they aggregate it and they're trying to make a comprehensive, objective list of the best movies of all time.
And it's complete horse shit, but we keep referencing
Yeah,
it. So
I
it's
was gonna say.
fine.
I mean, they don't have my opinion on there, so it's completely invalid anyway. Let's be real.
Well, we can fix that if they have, if you think about that, they have 13,000. I mean, there's a chance that we could even get on there. So who knows? But it's an interesting exercise just to at least see where, there's obviously critics from all over the world, so it's an interesting discussion point, if nothing else. They Shoot Zombies is just the same thing, but for horror lists, and it's by a fanboy who's also actually, so They Shoot Pictures is an Australian bloke who makes this list in his free time. I think he's a software developer or something. And They Shoot Zombies is also an Australian who is a fanboy of They Shoot Pictures and started one for horror. I'm trying to figure out a similar formula. So anyways, that's that. Something that's at least not one person's opinion, but the opinion of thousands. On They Shoot Pictures, Scream is 1,620.
Why do they hate it?
Yeah, I mean that
It's
feels
terrible.
okay. I'd be a little surprised if this is a top 1,000 movie.
It's a top 10 movie. This is better than the rules of the game.
I mean, I'm not gonna hate on it. It's fine. It's cute. Like,
Can I just note that honestly, I would rather Chris hate it because like calling it cute for some reason like boils me a little bit. Like, oh, it's so adorable.
yeah, I mean, it's okay. Like, it's like people that like movies got together and wrote a movie about people liking movies and having a horror movie inside of it. I know it was revolutionary at the time, I guess, in the sense of hadn't really been done a lot, so I'll give it that. But I mean, I think it's okay. Let's hear the right opinions though. What are the correct opinions on Scream? Should we do Zach and then end with Crit, or Zach and Adam and then end with Crit to get the right opinion?
Okay. Yeah. So I kind of want to give it like a little background because one of the things I love about Scream is kind of like its lineage to how it kind of got there. To me, there are like tons of like little moments in movies, especially in slasher films, that kind of led to Scream being what it was. I put a lot of it back on like back to trying to think, Slumber Party Massacre has a lot of referential humor, and that's just a few years after like slashers get like really big. And then you move over to 86, where you get Friday 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. You get a lot more referential humor. And it's just building onto this until we get to Popcorn in 1990, which is a slasher in a theater. And then it makes references. And then you get into Wes Craven's New Nightmare in 94. I think I'm right there, 94, which is a lot of, it's a lot more meta for that sense of, what storytelling is. And it's not quite what Scream would become, but all those little like benchmarks ended up with Scream and Kevin Williamson's script. And of course, we can kind of go into even talking about, even though it came in afterwards, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was a Williamson script written before Scream. So retroactively, it kind of led to that too, because also, again, it's a little bit more of I guess it's a straighter slasher in a sense. It's definitely more basic. And I Know What You Did Last Summer, and they just picked it up because Scream was such a phenomenon. But like, I do feel like it's almost like an understatement just to even call like Scream just revolutionary. Like the amount of time it took for slashers were being self-referential. It's almost like when you look at westerns, and they were kind of romanticizing the West and deconstructing the West while the West was going on. When you read like these dime store novels about famous gunslingers, just years after Halloween, they're already starting to make fun of themselves because of a formula that kind of peaked at that that sort of referential humor there. And I just to get my kick into Cabin in the Woods, this is what Cabin of the Woods wants to be. It's much more of a love letter. It's much more it much more loves its material and never feels above its material, which I think is great.
I agree with everything. Great. What about you, bud?
Yeah, so I think it's massively important to point out that it's not just what it is, but who's making it. So yeah, Scream had taken a lot of time to, accumulate culturally within, you know, the horror genre to be what it is. You know, it needed its time to become what it is. But this isn't just some newcomer coming in and observing what they've seen. This is Wes Craven. He had made classics in the genre a decade before this film even came out. He was certified in not just horror, but in cinema. He was a name, he was a staple. And I think that contributed to being a love letter and not just an observation more than anything, because he contributed to these cliches that he's pointing out. You know, he godfathered a lot of the ideas that Scream is making fun of. And I feel like Scream is not just a play on the horror genre or the slasher genre, but a play on him as a filmmaker. And I feel like he had that in him to be able to do that. Him and Williamson collabed to be able to make fun of themselves in this way. Like you said, I Know What You Did Last Summer was written before Scream. So, you know, Kevin Williamson had experience writing these kinds of movies before. And even though, you know, the I Know What You Did Last Summer wasn't published, he had familiarized himself with the tropes of that genre. So it's Kevin Williamson also, you know, making fun of himself, which he was known to do. He did it in Cursed as well. He did it with The Faculty. And I think it's an ode to Wes Craven himself. It's an ode to slashers. It's an ode to cinema. And it's an ode to humility. You know, like Scream is beloved unanimously. Well, other than Chris, he's the only person on the planet that doesn't like this film. And do you know how, speaking as a horror fan myself, how defensive we are of our genre? You know, like one film doesn't get nominated for the Oscars, and the whole fan base of horror just bans the Oscars. You know, we don't listen to it anymore. We're very defensive, and when someone makes fun of us or the films that we love, or tries to belittle the genre as lesser than another, we get really, really defensive about it. But no one gets defensive because of Scream, because Scream isn't attacking the genre. It's pointing out, hey, you know, like you've noticed this as well. And that's why it's funny. It plays with how you think about a slasher film, you know. The obvious becomes the less obvious. And maybe the obvious is actually just the obvious, and that's why it works. And yeah, this isn't articulated well at all, but I think it's a masterpiece of love.
No, I fully
think it's
agree.
yeah.
Like, and as you're basically saying, both you and Zach, with Wes Craven himself doing this, it's not like, and I know Zach hates Cabin in the Woods so much, because it's not made by horror people, so he feels like they're trying to belittle horror, in the way they made the movie. But with Wes Craven making something like Scream, and even with New Nightmare, which is probably my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film, I love New Nightmare so much for similar reasons to why I love Scream. But it does, it feels like a love letter, and it feels like Wes Craven has earned the right to lampoon the genre. It's not like somebody coming in and like, as much as I like the scary movies, it's not like that where they're going in and just like completely taking the piss out of the genre. This is still a damn fine horror film, despite the fact that it does have winks and nods and fun little moments that horror fans will enjoy. This is still a serious horror film at the end of the day. It's never really, it doesn't have the same tone as, you know, something like maybe Cabin in the Woods, which is a bit more lighthearted, or even, obviously, of course, not the scary movies. You guys have all sort of made really excellent points that really match why I love this film. And there's another reason why I love the Scream and the Scream franchise in general, in that it holds a mirror up to the slasher genre, but it's also very unique within the slasher genre in that Ghostface is not like Michael Myers or Jason or Freddy Krueger. Ghostface can be anybody, and he can be anywhere. And this is why, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the next films in the franchise, because obviously, despite I've completely forgotten the name of the freaking town now in Scream. Despite
Woodsboro.
Woodsboro, thank you. Despite Woodsboro being quite an iconic location, very little of the films actually take place there. Only 3 out of 6 take place in Woodsboro. And that's what's cool about Scream, with it being essentially a whodunit, film, just as much as it is a slasher movie. This is also a whodunit murder mystery, Agatha Christie style thing. We are trying to figure out not only why the killings are happening, but who actually is the killer, which is something you don't really get with slasher movies. You always know who Michael Myers is, who Jason is, who Freddy Krueger is. These are guys who come back and back and back and back, and you don't really have to give much context to them, except for when you have to try and explain how Jason gets to Manhattan. You don't have to do that with the Scream movies. And there's one thing, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I am my worst enemy when it comes to spoilers. So I will actively seek out spoilers for things because I rather just know as early as possible. But there's one thing to me that is sacred in life, and that is not knowing who the killers are in a Scream movie. If I go into a Scream movie for the first time knowing who the killers are, then that whole experience is ruined for me. It's just as much fun every time a new Scream film comes out, or when I've watched it for the first time. It's just as much fun for me to try and figure out who the killer is than it is with all the other normal horror stuff, like enjoying the creative kills and all that kind of, and set pieces and all that stuff. Just figuring out who the killer is just as much fun as anything else when it comes to a Scream movie, in my opinion. And that's why I love it, because yeah, it's a love letter to slasher films, but it's also completely unique within that genre.
Well, it worked. I mean, just to briefly touch on this point. So $15 million budget, 173 million box office, right? So people obviously flock to this.
Which, just to put context for that, I mean, slashers had been on their death throes throughout the 90s. People had gotten so burnt. I mean, think about there were 8 Friday the 13th films in the 1980s. That's a lot. And
that's
so
too many.
Yeah, and I mean, oh God, we got the annual Adam hates Friday the 13th day. But and then you look at what came out before Scream. There was some good stuff there, but nothing people cared to go see necessarily.
Also, I feel like it's quite funny that this film is making comments on the past, but it also influenced the future of slashers massively. After Scream, loads of slashers, most of them became whodunits. Even the way down to things like Urban Legend and Valentine. They became whodunits, which wasn't, as you said, it wasn't a norm for slashers to be. It was, it had happened a little bit before, but it was never a huge staple. And then Scream did it, and then it became a staple. It's just a thing in slasher films now.
Yeah, and I think it's because when you look at slashers before, they're almost like monster villains, the Universal monsters. They're the modern form of it. So they always felt like you need, you always know who Frankenstein is, you always know who Dracula is, and I feel like you need that. For a long time, slashers felt like they needed that element, and it kind of interesting because even though there's an argument that it pulled from Giallo films. Those were always whodunit. They were nonsensical whodunit, so maybe Scream improved upon that in its own sense, but there's always been that weird connection between them, even though it's kind of superficial in what they are, but they do have a lot of connection together.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never put together the Giallo aspect of it, because as you said, a Dario Argento movie is nearly always trying to figure out who the killer is, so makes sense.
I also just slightly veer off topic. I wouldn't feel justified in being here if I didn't give the full context as well of my love of this film. As some of you may know, I am a huge horror fan. It's my genre. I did a whole video about why it's the greatest genre, and I wasn't always into horror films. I actually didn't really like them at all. Because I was a young teenager and mid-teenager when the Conjuring films started coming out. And teenage years are when you get into horror films. That's when they're the most fun, probably. And The Conjuring was like the biggest thing in horror at the time. So my hate for those films is very well documented. I think they very much water down the genre. And it wasn't until I came across Scream did I fall in love with a horror film. And then it was from there that I fell in love with other films like The Thing and the Evil Dead films. But Scream was what put me into the space where I wanted to talk about horror. And I feel like I spoiled myself way too quickly by watching one of the greatest horror films very early on. And it just felt like a cut above the rest. I mean, I have a Ghostface tattoo. Like, it means a lot to me, this film does. I own it on DVD, I own it in a box set, a Blu-ray, 4K, and steel case. That goes as well for pretty much the rest of the genre. And Wes Craven is a director that means a lot to me also. I did a huge Wes Craven ranked video, and Scream came out on top. It's that 3 videos ago I did the ultimate horror movie madness bracket where I put 64 of the most fawned over horror movies against each other, and lo and behold, Scream won. It's just a film that it's weird when you watch a whodunit. A lot of the times after the reveal has happened, you lose a quality in that film. And it may be good afterwards, but there is still something missing. There's that excitement missing. And I just don't think Scream loses that. The first time is obviously very different to the rest of them, but it still has that excitement in it for me. I feel like the way the characters are written, watching them try to figure it out every single time is the excitement past that point. It's even when you're watching it yourself, it's not just you who wants to figure it out. You want them to figure it out. You want the payoff of the reveal and stuff. And I feel like horror since then had been chasing that feeling.
Well, I'd say even the Scream movies have been chasing that. Like the reveal in the first one, I think, has tried to be replicated again and again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been some good ones, but I think they've never come close to the reveal and the dynamic change.
Absolutely
From
not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, this film, okay, so also, I know this seems off topic, but the Scooby-Doo, I'm really into Scooby-Doo. It's a bit of a meme. I'm not actually into it as much as people think, but I do really love Scooby-Doo, but a lot of that is the live action movies and Matthew Lillard. And my love for Matthew Lillard came from Scream and the third act especially. He's such a fantastic actor that I don't think is given nearly enough credit. I think he probably gives the best performance in this film. And it's a shame, he's never returned to the franchise. Even though I feel like it may water down this film slightly, I'd give half a leg to see that again.
Yeah, Matthew Lillard is so good, especially in that final part. But I agree in terms of rewatchability. Like, I don't know how many times I've seen Scream. I couldn't count. But it never loses rewatchability. In fact, and I said this to my wife the other day when we were going to sit down and rewatch it again for in prep for this, and because it's October, so of course I'm going to watch all the Scream movies. I said to her, Scream is really my comfort movie. Whenever I'm sort of feel sick or down or whatever, I just watch Scream. And she was driving at the time. She kind of gave me a bit of a side eye, and she says, "So you're comforted by people getting stabbed?" I was like, no, wait, I didn't mean it like that. I just like that I like that I know it so well, but I always learn new stuff from it as well in terms of different references and things like that. And even half the fun going back now is just picking up on hints. Hints on who the killers were.
Yeah.
And I agree that the reveal in the first Scream movie is pretty much far and away the best one of the rest. I don't think the rest of the films give anywhere near as many hints as the first one does when you go back and watch it. Even just like little glances between people and little just drops here and there. It seems so obvious kind of watching it back, but it's just fun watching that.
I mean, uh, just the whole reveal of them being two.
Oh, game changer, because
I
there's never been
remember
two.
that like people don't really talk about that too much. They talk about like the reveal of who it was, but I think more so for me the reveal that there was two of them the whole time. It choked me. I remember I was watching it for the first time and I was really loving it, and then you know as soon as we get the reveal that there's two and it was that, I remember pausing the movie and just walking out the room and I was literally screaming. I was Home Alone, but I was screaming. I was like, no fucking way. Like I was absolutely jaw dropped. And it's more than just the reveal, it's the amount. It
Yeah.
revealed more than you thought it would even reveal.
Yeah,
Well,
and I
this is
think
it.
that
Okay.
comes. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say just about the fact that, with it being two, it's obviously a game changer because that was just never a thing, in slashers. It was always just the one indestructible killer. And in a way, it almost seems like revision, because a lot of the time you wonder when you're watching like a Halloween movie or whatever, you're like, okay, well, like Michael was just there. How is he now here? That makes no
Yeah.
sense at all. So it feels like a revision to like, okay, well, this is how this is why Ghostface could have been in multiple places. He's not some crazy, omnipotent creature who can just show up somewhere. It's because, there was two of them. So it's a way of kind of revising and making it a bit more realistic, I guess, compared to the sort of staple slashers.
Wait,
You know,
sorry. Hold on, hold on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's some wild takes here. Okay, so I feel like I have to defend a few things. But I want to give a quick backdrop. So I love horror, right? So this is not coming from a place of me being uh um thinking it's like lowbrow or something. Like if anything, I don't know, Crit, how many episodes you've listened to, and that's not meant to put you on the spot, but I'm usually defending the trash more than
I know.
more
I've
than
listened
anyone
to
else.
a lot, don't worry.
Okay, okay, cool,
I'm
cool,
a
thanks.
fan.
Oh, that's well, thank you very much. Certainly don't have to be, but I appreciate that. So no ego in this, or not saying that it's not high art or anything. I'm totally on board with all those things. But I guess there's just one thing I guess I'd love to hear y'all's opinion on, because I don't quite get, like, okay, get the history, the people behind the movie. That's super interesting. I guess what I'm hearing y'all say is that it was just a movie that hit kind of at an influential time in your lives personally. So like it has a sentimental attachment, right? So it's difficult to watch this movie objectively because it was like a formative movie. Is that fair? It was like something that
Well, I
was
would say that it didn't hit me in an influential time. I think this movie sparked an influential time. I think that's the distinction. It wasn't like I was falling in love with horror and then this came out and, I fell in love with it. I didn't like horror that much until I had watched this film.
okay. And roughly how old were you when you saw it? Just,
I was 17 or 18, roughly.
okay. Yeah, because that's, and Adam, what about you?
I don't know, bro. This film's been with me as long as I know life.
Okay.
I genuinely
So
don't know when I first watched Scream.
yeah, I just, it feels like maybe this is one of those movies that would have been, because okay, like for me, Wes Craven is all about Freddy Krueger, right? Because I grew up with that. And like I remember when I was way too young, I saw the first Freddy Krueger movie. Um, and I was just like drawn in. I was like, I want more of that. I was probably like 5 or something. But like I wasn't put off by it. It was just like amazing. I was just like, I guess I could tell that it was costumes and stuff, like and makeup, and I think Nightmare on Elm Street is good for that because everything is very theatrical in it, right? So it's, if you're trying to tell a kid that there's like a separation between reality and movie making and that kind of stuff, like I feel like that's a good one to show, because Halloween is, it's more difficult, right? It's just like a really creepy dude in a mask. Like that could be anybody. But Nightmare on Elm Street is like obviously not real, if that makes sense. Um, so I'm even a big fan of Wes Craven, and I think that movie was more influential for me So by the time Scream came out, I was kind of like in my I know better than everybody phase in life. I was 14, probably saw it in by the time I got to Indonesia, I was probably 15. I'm sure it took at least a year. And so I was kind of, I kind of knew better than everybody. And like this was one that I kind of made fun of for years because it was like silly humor. Matthew Lillard's like a goofball. I actually defend him, but he's like a big goofball. Um, and the whole tone of the movie was like silly and kind of, it just so my first impression of this and the thing that I carried with me for years was that it was like it was fine, but it was sort of like a one that wasn't meant to be taken that seriously. So it's interesting hearing the way that y'all talk about it. Um, I just haven't really heard it put that eloquently. Y'all are doing a great job. It's just interesting for me to hear it that way because it sort of makes me realize that it's impacting people in that way, as opposed to being just like a fun thing that you put on if you're kind of bored and like doing chores around the house. Like it's not a bad thing to have on in the background kind of movie, which is where it's sat in my mind for years.
Yeah, see, because the film is fun, and this is why it's great because it's fun, but it's really well written. The film is so well written in terms of balancing the quirky things, so the references and so on and so forth, with an actual serious mystery and some really great characters with some really great dialogue. So it's a really well written film, and it is a lot of fun. So it does have the best of both worlds, in my opinion. Like even something as we'll take the whole opening scene, for example. Everyone kind of talks about how meta it is because they're making jokes about what's your favorite horror movie, and quizzing her on who the killer was in Friday the 13th, and it wasn't Jason, it was blah blah blah. And when you watch the film the first time, that's what you're really focusing on, and then you've watched the film a few times and you're sort of more in tune with the nuances, and then you realize that the point of that whole opening scene is not to have that nice little fun sort of quiz that leads to a murder. That whole entire opening scene is a reference to Psycho, in the fact that they have the apparent star of the movie, Drew Barrymore, who was plastered front and center on all the posters and everything like that, gets lobbed off 5 minutes into the movie. So it's not really about the fun, quirky stuff. It's actually a really smart reference to Psycho, which if you've never seen Psycho, you wouldn't have even known that was happening. So
Also,
there's a lot of levels here, I think.
I think as well to that point that it also, on top of being a perfect introduction to the vibe of the movie, it sets the tone perfectly. It throws you off completely with the whole Drew Barrymore whatever. And it does those things very well, but it also plays a part in the story. It's not just like a character that doesn't mean anything to the main characters. Like it's important and it's vital to the story that it's that person. That is a hint in itself, because in the very first conversation that the whole group are having at that water fountain or whatever, they bring up that Stu had dated her before, and they go through that whole thing, and that's the very first person they throw suspicion on is Stu, and the very first person that comes to his defense is Billy. And it's like they're putting it right there, they're giving it to you on a plate, but because it's so early in the movie that you have to dismiss it. You feel like you have to dismiss it because no way is the movie just going to pretty much outwardly tell you who did it in the first 5 minutes.
And
it continues to do that. Sorry, Zach.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, and I think when we talk about the two killers, kind of bringing it back to that, that's probably why it works so well, is because, in all honesty, Skeet Ulrich is such the obvious killer.
Yeah,
but but adding that second little bit where you're like, well, he can't have done it because he was in jail, like they mentioned at one point. So you're like, okay, that's the red herring, and it just completely takes you off of it for the most part. But the kind of the brilliant part is you have the most obvious guy is the killer, and from what people can kind of piece together, he did almost all of the killings except for one, which I think they believe the principal was killed by Stu, if I remember what people have kind of pieced together.
Yeah, exactly. That's who I would have figured.
That's also like another fun aspect of the films is watching and seeing who killed who. just purely based on motivations and positions and what would make most sense. And that's also an aspect of the films that I don't think is talked about nearly enough. Because the whole oh wow, I've completely forgotten her name. Stu's girlfriend.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
It's right
Uh,
there.
Tatum?
Tatum.
Tatum,
That's
yes,
it.
Tatum.
Tatum. There we go.
Jesus.
Jesus.
Who's
Sorry,
the
Tatum.
man here?
Yeah. With the whole murder of Tatum, that's Stu's girlfriend, and that begs more questions of whether the relationship was fake, because it does seem real. Like Stu doesn't seem like he's fake liking Tatum. So then, it adds the whole politics of, well, it can't be Stu, because why would Stu kill his own girlfriend? What would be the reason? But then if it isn't his idea and if it's Billy, then why was Stu okay with this whole thing? And I feel like the questions are a big part of the experience also, and they give you a lot to think about after the film is over. Like, the experience doesn't finish when the credits roll. And that's one of the things I appreciate about the film also.
Isn't Tatum Rose McGowan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
who wouldn't date Rose McGowan?
So true.
Also, actually, this just weirdly came to my head, but in the same year, I'm pretty sure it's the same year, 1996, The Craft came out.
Yeah.
Which
No, it was
also
it was a year prior. No, sorry. I'm trying. The only reason I'm wondering this now as well is because I had mentioned when I was watching Scream 2, I'd mentioned that Neve Campbell looks like she did in The Craft. So I think The Craft came out
they're
in
both
between.
96.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. Which both feature Neve Campbell and Skeet Ulrich. They're both in that movie, and I heard some background thing that Neve Campbell actually wasn't going to be in Scream. She wasn't going to audition for it because she didn't want to do two horror, adjacent movies in the same year. But Skeet Ulrich was the one that convinced her to come back and do it. To audition, she becomes Sydney. It's a great little story, but also I feel like in retrospect it works as well because, as Zach said, that Skeet as Billy is quite obviously the killer, but also in real world context, in The Craft, Skeet Ulrich's character is a villain. He's not a villain in the exact same sense. He's not a killer, but he's an awful person. And I feel like, I don't know whether they had access to that information or not, but it just works that if you had seen The Craft first, which, it was made first, and I'm pretty sure it released just before Scream. It's within type, casting Skeet Ulrich as another bad guy, which then makes you think, well, it wouldn't be that obvious then, so it surely isn't Skeet Ulrich. So I feel like they play a little well in tandem also.
Yeah, he just seems like that person. He just has the look of a villain. That's just it is what it is, and like we said, the film plays into that well because it creates a world where it's so obvious that he is the killer that when things happen in the third half, it just throws you into a loop, or the third act. Yeah, third act is the best way to put it. When things happen in the third act, it just throws you into a complete loop because you're like, oh shit, well, if he's not the killer, then who is the killer? And then it just throws you all around the place. And the third act is just so crazy.
Yeah, they do the phone call thing, like Zach said, and then they also do him fake dying. They do a fake out death.
Yeah, the fake out. Yeah.
And they do really well of just going, no, this is the guy. This is definitely the guy. So you're like, okay, that's the guy. And then they go, no, but it can't be the guy, can it? And you're like, oh, well, surely it's not the guy then. And the movie like just convinces you so easily on a whim on who you should believe it is. It kind of makes you feel like you don't have independent thought. Like when you watch back at the videotape store scene.
With Randy. Yeah.
When Jamie Kennedy's Randy's like freaking out, just saying it's so obviously Billy.
He even says it's a red herring. Billy's the killer.
Yeah,
So
he's literally screaming it. Like there's a formula to these things. And then but this actually probably goes to an earlier point where Stu asks him, then why would he kill blah blah blah. why would he try and kill Sydney? And Randy goes, well, there's always some crazy excuse to kill your girlfriend. That goes, Stu killing Tatum later on, there's always an excuse to do it. But we still give ourselves that same rationale, like, why would Stu kill Tatum? So he can't be Stu. But, as Randy already told us, there's always some crazy excuse to kill your girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then the way they both like tag team, trying to terrify Randy in the middle of the store. It's so obvious. It's them. Like, it couldn't be more obvious if they had Bugs Bunny holding up a sign with an arrow to him.
Yeah, completely agree. And again, that's why it's so fun rewatching it, because you're just trying to. All the signs are there. We talked about the fountain scene already, and obviously mentioning the sort of name dropping he was going out with Casey Becker. And then he also proceeds to describe in graphic detail how you disembowel somebody before Billy tells him to have some tact. So yeah, it's all, yeah.
And I was going to say, Matthew Lillard has the longest tongue I've ever seen in that fountain.
Yes, he really does. He really does.
And I quote his performance in that third act like incessantly.
It's so good.
It's amazing.
My favorite
line
is
like,
my parents. Give me your phone, you dick. My parents are gonna be so mad at me.
Yeah, I quote the this one's a screamer like a lot. It's so funny. He's so goofy, and it comes out of absolutely nowhere. It's one of the most fun performances I've ever seen an actor give. Like, you can tell he read the script and he was like, yeah, I can do that. And then he turned it up to 12. He turns on his Jack Nicholson dial.
Yeah. And I think the reason it works, like, I know, Chris, you'll probably get into it a little bit more, where you kind of find it a little hammy. And obviously these are young adults playing teenagers. That's been a problem of horror and a joke of horror for like years. But this feels like what a 16 or 17-year-old kid would find terrifying. Like, if he had to like practice how to seem like a psychopath, this is the way they would act. And I think that's great. I think that's why it works in retrospectives. He wants to be scary, but it almost comes off as goofy, because at the end of the day, it's a teenage kid. And of course, there'll be things that follow the Scream universe after 99 that kind of retroactively come back into this. But I think that's why Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich work so much, because I think Skeet's more of, like, they're both psychopaths, but I think Billy is a lot more of a psychopath, and he doesn't show it as overtly. And that's probably what makes him be able to hide as well as he does in certain places.
Yeah, I like Matthew Lillard because right around this time, Pauly Shore was also very big, right? And it was kind of this like weird time. Even the Ernest movies. I don't know if y'all remember those, like Ernest Saves Christmas and Ernest Goes to Camp. There was like this weird time in the 90s where it was encouraged to be just like a total dickhead. And I think Matthew Lillard somehow adds a little bit of weight to his performances. Like, I think it's kind of who Pauly Shore was trying to be, in a way. I still defend Pauly Shore. Maybe whether or not I should, we can talk about that. I like his stuff.
I don't even know who that is, old man.
What?
He recently voiced Pinocchio.
I have no idea who or what a Pauly
Shore
is.
Pinocchio? Was it
the really awful one? Oh, actually,
okay.
That doesn't narrow it down at all, does it?
Hold on. You don't know who Pauly Shore is?
No, when you say the word Pauly Shore, all I think of is Jersey Shore, and I assume it's somebody on there who's called Pauly. But no,
I think of the movie Pauly, that's about the bird. So I'm on the other end.
Oh my gosh, what the hell is happening right now?
Yeah, I think about 2021's Pinocchio.
Oh my god. Okay, hold on. Have you all at least seen a Goofy movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, he's the kid in a Goofy movie.
Okay.
Oh, but but Pauly Shore was a phenomenon. Like,
sure, man.
Like, okay. Oh my gosh, this is wild.
See, Chris is now realizing that two of us were 2 years old when Scream came out, and one of us wasn't even alive when Scream came out. And he was.
Yeah, okay, so I'm the only one who saw Scream in theaters, so my opinion is the only one that matters here, right?
As far as I'm aware, I don't think my parents would have brought me to see it, but you never know. My dad showed me The Exorcist when I was 3, so it's very possible I was there.
Holy shit.
I love the idea that Chris thinks Pauly Shore was like a phenomenon, but Scream wasn't.
No, 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 no. Pauly Shore was way bigger of a phenomenon. He was on MTV as like a VJ, so like he was introducing videos and just being kind of an asshole.
Wait, was he on Teen Mom? Is that what you're telling me? Since he was on MTV, because they don't play music,
Yeah,
right? They
MTV
yeah.
is not music. He must have been on like Super Sweet 16 or something.
Y'all get fucked. That's too funny. Okay, well, anyways, I guess this story means nothing to y'all, but there was a whole wave of people in the 90s of people just acting like way over the top and goofy. And Matthew Lillard fits very well into that, I think. Even in something that was very influential to me, like SLC Punk, he's always just played kind of big, right? And that's like his thing. But I think the thing I like about him is there's like an intelligence behind his eyes, even when he's being just like really kind of over the top and goofy. And I think that kind of works here. I don't want to give him too much credit for this performance, but I do think he's having fun with it. And Crit, I don't want to fight with your hero. Like he's very good in this.
I would say it's more than just an intelligence behind his eyes, though. I feel like there's a real emotional weight behind it also. You know, like when he's acting over the top in Scream, he doesn't feel like an actor playing it over the top. He feels like a mentally unwell person in like a highly distressing situation. You know, it's very theatrical, but there's a feeling behind it. You know, like at the very end, you know, that my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me. You know, it feels sincere. It feels like that is actually what his main concern is of the moment, not dying or going to jail. You know, there is like this adolescent emotional weight to it.
He's a rich kid who doesn't understand the weight of his decisions until they come crashing down. Because for him, this was probably just like fun.
Yeah.
You know, he could get away with it. He's a rich kid, and the genie came out of the bottle. There's no putting it back. And I think that's kind of the moment he realizes it.
Also, I love that one line where Sydney's on the phone to him in that last thing, and she's like, "Oh, the police are on their way. What are you going to tell them?" And he goes, "Peer pressure. I'm far too sensitive." It's a beautiful line because that's exactly what a spoiled rich kid would say. You know, like, "Oh, I didn't really know what I was doing." You know.
Even the way he says it, I completely agree. I think Matthew Lillard's fantastic in this.
And it seems like he already had that in his pocket too. Like he comes up with it. So he's like, this dude had it in his pocket. He was ready.
Oh, he had all the excuses right.
You know, he instantly tries to make himself the victim of the situation.
Yeah. So I think any final thoughts on Scream before I move on to the sequels?
It's the greatest movie ever made.
Wow.
I did want to highlight what I think is the smartest moment in the film.
Okay.
It's the part where Jamie Kennedy is laying on the couch and Ghostface is behind him, and he's talking to the movie Halloween and saying, Jamie, referring to Jamie Lee Curtis, look out behind you. And of course, Wes is smart enough to just it's like, look, there's not going to be a better composer right here than John Carpenter. I'm just going to let the movie play with his score behind it. And it is brilliant.
And I also love that he's saying Jamie get up, Jamie get up, and the actor is called Jamie Kennedy. He's saying it both to Jamie Lee Curtis and himself.
Yeah, that's what I thought you was about to say, like, because he's talking to himself, yeah.
But the score also works too, absolutely. Cool. Cool. We'll move on to Scream 2 then. Let me just pull up the old Letterboxd synopsis. Scream 2 came out like the following year. The Scream phenomenon, as much as Chris wants to deny it, it was big considering they churned out a sequel within a year. Came out in 1997, once again directed by Wes Craven, of course. The synopsis for this one is 2 years after the terrifying events that occurred in Woodsboro, Sydney is now attending Windsor College in Cincinnati, and Gail Weathers' best-selling book on Sydney's life is now being made into a major motion picture. When two college students are killed in a theater while watching the new film Stab, Sydney knows deep down the history is repeating itself. So because Chris, you kind of gave us a hint into your take on this, I'm actually going to save you for last, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just as I think it's an interesting take, what you hinted at. Scream 2, I'll just start with myself, if that's okay. So with Scream 2, I like Scream 2, and I'm somebody who at times struggles to kind of put the sequels in order. If I try and make like a ranked list of the Scream movies, obviously number one is on top, and then I kind of struggle with the rest apart from like three. I kind of struggle with everything else in terms of where I put it. Um, I think Scream 2 gets a bit too crazy with the plot, in my opinion. I think it it needs a little bit of a trimming down. But overall, it does what Randy says, really. It steps up kind of the kills, the mystery, the intrigue, the location, the set pieces, etc., etc. It does kind of step up on everything, but I do feel that it just lost the tightness of the first film, which makes me not like it as more in terms of wanting to actively rewatch it as much as I want to rewatch the first one. But yeah, I think it's still a great movie. It's still better than like 99% of slasher sequels. So it automatically makes it good. And I think we'll go backwards, I guess. So do you want to crit? Why don't you jump in next and then we can get Zach's
Yeah.
take?
Second greatest movie ever made. No. I think, well, it is my second favorite Scream film. I love how it exactly retreads the formula of the first film. Because again, that's just something so obviously not what you should do, that doing it makes it smart. It's really backwards logic, but yeah, it's amazing. Also, I feel like this has the best aesthetic out of all of the Scream films. I think the costuming is gorgeous. Yeah, I love it. I don't know. I will say, Randy's characterization in this film, very odd. I do love Randy.
Yeah.
You know, he's one of my favorite characters in the franchise, probably second favorite. But his whole taking down of sequels bit that goes on pretty much the whole time feels noticeably like out of character. Just for someone to say, you know, because I get the gag, you know, that sequels are inferior by definition. And what's actually quite funny is, you know, what's his character's name? Not Randy.
I know
Mickey.
Timothy
That's
Oliphant's character.
Yeah,
Mickey.
Mickey. Yeah, Mickey is the one that say no, sequels, you know, can be better. You know, again, just really pushing it in your face instantly. This is the guy. But I feel like Randy's commitment to the idea is a bit, you know, out of control. Like later on at the party when they bring up, you know, Empire Strikes Back, and he goes, you know, it's not a sequel. It's the second part in, you know, a planned trilogy. You know, well, that doesn't not
Ridiculous
make it a
take.
sequel. Yeah. And then,
I
you know,
think-
when
Sorry. No. I was just going to say, I think I totally get where you're coming from, and it does come across as actually like annoying. But at the same time, as someone who has met first year film students, they're all annoying and they all have terrible takes. So I kind of get it.
It's a good point. But also, this is my problem. I wouldn't mind it if it was anyone else but Randy. Because Randy in the franchise, you know, well, especially, you know, early on, he was the one to set the rules, you know, that the film is going to play by. You know, he's kind of the voice, kind of the narrator in a way. Yeah, even in this film, he sets out the rules of a sequel, and the film plays exactly by that. So I always have this hard time where it's like, well, does the film think Randy's right or is he wrong? You know, and ultimately I suppose he's wrong because he does get killed. So I guess that speaks to that. But I just feel like the film can't decide whether Randy is smart or not.
Yeah, I can get that. And that's often been something that's annoyed the sort of Scream fans, the kind of Flanderization of Randy a little bit, that they kind of leaned super hard into the film nerd stuff, but like took away, you know, any kind of survivability, and the way he gets sort of done in. It's one of the things that I've heard a lot of pushback on Scream 2, just how Randy in general is just treated as a character.
Yeah, I don't mind the characterization as long as it's consistent, but it just kind of doesn't feel consistent.
Zach, what about you, baby?
So I will keep the Randy train here going. So I rank this second worst in the franchise for me. I have a lot of problems with Scream 2.
Wow.
I will I think I could sum it up with Randy, my issues with it. So there's a scene where they're in the classroom talking about sequels, which you guys referenced. And Joshua Jackson's character says the line in Aliens, and he's correct. He's 100% correct on that line.
Mm-hmm.
Randy responds and gives the wrong quote and then chastises him for not knowing it because they're in a film class when he in fact doesn't know it. So I can only come to two conclusions of what it is. Randy is in a lot of ways the horror fan surrogate in these films. You know, he's the one who knows it. He knows the tropes. He knows the cliches. For a lot of us, he is our representation. So either the film is saying we don't know anything about this type of movie, or it's a genuine mistake and it just kind of feels kind of lazy in a film that's supposed to, you know, be getting these references and getting them correct and saying something with them. And I don't really feel comfortable with either to say they're great, but I think that's kind of a big problem I have with the film is like a whole as well. Like it just doesn't feel as smart. I think the idea of saying sequels are inferior so many times is just kind of that postmodern problem we see nowadays, where it's like, if I reference this as terrible, they can't criticize me for it. And I understand there's a lot of like, there's a sad whole story with the fact that, you know, the scripts for Scream was, you know, leaked online. You know, all 20% of people who probably had internet connection in 1997 could have found out what the ending was on their dial-up internet. But, you know, still, I understand not wanting your movie spoiled. I understand they had to rewrite a lot of it a lot of times on the fly. But I don't know. Sometimes it comes off as lazy. And then you have the third act, which is just kind of a try to recreate. But there is good stuff in it. I like a lot of the scenes. I like Cotton Weary's character. I actually wish she was in it more because, you know, we get such a small part of him in the first one with no lines. You know, give me Schreiber here. And I mean, I think it's still a fun film, even if I don't think it comes close to, even nowhere close to the heights of the first one.
Now here's Chris to tell you why you're wrong.
Y'all, I'm shocked and appalled at these bad takes. So for all of my mediocre opinions on Scream, I think Scream 2 nails it. Like, I think this is a far superior movie. And I've been trying to think about why, based on the funny reactions from y'all, when I said that. And I have a couple of things. I guess I should get something out of the way first. So They Shoot Zombies has it as the 290th best horror movie of all time. Let's see, what's anything interesting around it? Last Man on Earth, Slither is above it slightly.
Too low. It's too low.
Slither, I agree, should be higher. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1941 is up there. Under the Skin is around there. Werewolf of London, so VIY. So it's kind of in that, you know, lesser known but high quality horror movies. Or I should say deep cut horror movies. And then as far as They Shoot Pictures, it's 9,454. So at that point, like, who cares, right? It's you know, as far as like what it's around and stuff. Also feel like I should say this was another smash hit, so very beloved, or at least made a lot of money. 24 million budget, 172 box office. Interestingly enough, I was trying to find some critics that defended my position. So I went on Rotten Tomatoes, even though I know all the flaws of that. But this had a higher rating by critics, even though a much, much lower rating by fans. So Scream 1 had an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, and Scream 2 had an 82% by critics.
Though it should be noted, Rotten Tomatoes did not exist in 1996, 1997, and so a lot of these are retroactive or newly added or anything like that. As flawed as Rotten Tomatoes is, older movies are real weird on there that existed before Rotten Tomatoes.
No, that's fair. I mean, it just seems like maybe I'm not the only one who thinks it's better. But I guess is my kind of, weird point. But the okay, so why though? I like it better because this goes into my favorite thing about horror franchises. I really love horror franchises. I like it when I like the idea that people are sitting around a table thinking about how to expand the universe, right? And some people do it really bad. But this one I think works for me extremely well because all of the like for me, Scream is a little bit like some kid who's not quite grown into their body yet and is a little bit goofy, although they have a lot of positive traits. And then Scream 2 for me is like them maturing into their body and like everything clicks. Like I like I think the meta humor works better for me in this in terms of they're in film school. I think the actual deaths are better in Scream 2. Like there's that one awesome death where it's like through the soundproof glass, where the killer comes up behind. I think that's one of the best deaths I've seen so far in the
Death,
first three
quote
movies.
unquote.
I was gonna say technically it's a fake out death. He doesn't die.
Okay, nerds. I'm just saying. No. Sorry, I hope that was. But like, yeah, like I'm just like that to me is like everything works better except for the reveal. I did not like the reveal in Scream 2 as much as Scream 1. So I don't know if that maybe taints things. The motivation and like all the stuff in Scream 2 bleeds into one of the massive problems I have with Scream 3. But yeah, I just think like Scream 2 is like awesome. Like I would, if there was a movie here that I would watch again, it would, well, no, actually, let me say it differently. Scream 2 makes me want to go back and revisit Scream 1. Because it feels like it's sort of like building on the lore and like building on everything in a way that is meaningful. So that's my take for Y2.
Chris, I do. Oh, go ahead,
No,
Chris.
oh, okay. Okay. I was just gonna say I don't like because I know my opening actually wasn't that optimistic, but I have this movie on a 5 stars. Like I will say, like I adore this movie, and apart from the Randy thing, I do think it's practically perfect. I'm different to I guess all of you. I really love the killer reveal scene.
Okay.
I like I mean obviously the whole idea of Mrs. Loomis is genius, and I think the way they dangled it was great. And I don't think it was as obvious, which doesn't make it as fun, but I do think it was a great idea regardless. I also like that the dynamics between the two killers is pretty much the same. You know, it's a Loomis going for a more mentally unwell person to stage their grand plan. But in the case of Mrs. Loomis and Mickey believes he's going to be the star. And I feel like that was a good way to redo the same kind of thing, but with different motivations and different goals behind it. I do think the whole Timothy Olyphant performance is trying to recapture a Stu essence in the end. But in the way that I think works well, because Stu's is very emotionally intense. It's very high. Whereas Timothy's is very it's more subdued. It's crazy, but it feels more sinister. With a lot more intent behind it, because we learned that he was actually a serial killer before this.
Right.
He's just adopted Ghostface halfway through, as through his guidance. And I think it just works. I think it's a fantastic movie.
I think for me, I guess because I'm kind of the negative Nancy here on Scream 2, even though I do like it. I think for me, like when I look at it as like the series as a whole, it has like the same problem with like Halloween 2. Since that's my favorite horror franchise, I'll definitely use it as an example. Halloween 2 is one of those ones that's also a fan favorite, but I have a lot of problems with it. And it's really because a lot of the problems that stay with the franchise are birthed in that first sequel. And I think Scream 2 is the same way. Chris, you kind of alluded to, the killer reveal, and we learn more about Maureen Prescott. That's going to be a problem for a while about retroacting a lot of stuff of Maureen Prescott, and they won't let it go. They just won't let it go. And it's a lot of things like that. It's a lot of things. And while they kill Randy in this one, I'm sure you noticed, Chris. We're skipping ahead a little bit to the third one. They keep doing this thing where they only pretend to kill off these main characters like Dewey. And some people argue it's a running gag. It's kind of annoying. But it's one we'll definitely talk more about as we get more into it. But it's something they're very connected to their characters, and they're really scared to do anything with them.
Yeah. Zach hates any movie that implies horror fans are idiots, so that was never going to be a good start. But I will say that I completely agree with Halloween 2. It's garbage. Halloween 2 is terrible.
Yeah, I hate Halloween 2 also.
So
Whoa!
bad.
I mean, I'm not like the biggest fan of it, but I would have thought we all would have liked it a lot more.
No,
Halloween 4 is better. 4 is way better.
Yeah,
4 is goated.
Like 2
3
has
is the best
problem.
sequel. I don't care.
3 is good. I have 3 pretty high too, but I don't want to get too off topic, but 2 is where the Michael and Laurie are brother and sister thing start. And while every sequel up till recently had that as a plot point, the other ones are kind of like, fuck it, we're stuck with it, so let's do what we can with it. And they try to do something creative with it. That one was just, Carpenter was like, I don't fucking know what to do. I'm going to get drunk and write a script. Fair enough to him. He didn't want to do it. But that's a lot of times how sequels turn out. It's just like, at least the first one. And then after that, they start getting a little bit more like, we got to figure this out in some degree, even if it means Michael's going to he's going to talk to his niece in his mind. It gets wild, but still, I don't know. There's creativity with it that I like a little bit more.
Actually, oh no, go actually, because I'm going to get off topic. Go.
Well, I think I'm agreeing with y'all. I just wanted to look it up. So I have Halloween 2 is the 7th, my 7th favorite. Not too much of a favorite.
Sounds fair.
What did you say the best one was? Halloween 3?
Yep.
Halloween 4, I would say. I like Halloween 3. Halloween 4, in terms of the main continuity of Halloween, Michael Myers, Halloween 4 is my favorite.
Yeah, I was kind of neutral on 4 and 5. H2O is number 2 for me.
I hate H2O. Oh god, that's a whole. We could probably talk about it because it's Scream related, but I do not like H2O.
Let's next Halloween we'll do the whole the whole Halloween franchise. We'll do that next. We'll do that next October. Any final thoughts on Scream 2 before we move on? To Scream
I
3?
just want to quickly say that we've Zach brought up all the things that this movie spawned that plagues the series going forward. I just want to bring up something that it brings round that was unique to this film and not the first film, that works incredibly well, which is Stab. The whole idea of creating the in-universe Stab films, I think, was beautiful and gave the franchise a lot of potential for future writing in the sequels also.
Yes, and I do want to add on to that because I think that's a great point. We're not going to watch the Scream TV series on this for this, so I hope nobody. I hope we had no TV fans who were like, please hope they talk about it. But I do want to bring up something that was a really cool idea from that series if it wasn't completely trash. So the whole reveal with that show was going to be that at the 3rd or 4th season, whatever it was going to be, they were going to reveal that they were filming a Stab TV show.
Oh,
and that then the characters would have actually been the actors being killed by the real Ghostface with the Roger Jackson voice and everything else. And we haven't even talked about Roger Jackson, which is probably a tragedy. Great performance, just all the way around. Yeah. But I mean, there's definitely ideas of something you can do with the Stab movie. I just wish the TV show had done it better. But it's definitely a cool dynamic within, and especially when we get to Scream 4, so you can be excited, Chris, if you like the Stab stuff. You'll get plenty of that in Scream 4.
Awesome. No, just a super quick point. There's something that if we talk about this movie being meta in general, there's another layer to this that I love, which I think they start to do in 1, but really lean into here, and I like it. They get very hot celebrities to be in these movies in minor roles, and I think it just adds to the I think it adds another layer there, which I really liked.
Fucking Luke
like,
Wilson as Skeet Ulrich. That's amazing.
hilarious,
So
right?
good.
Like
So good.
that's exactly what I was thinking of, actually. That's brilliant. And then like Heather Graham coming in, like there's just, if you look at the cast
Oh,
list,
and Tori Spelling.
Tori
Because
Spelling,
do you remember
amazing,
in the
right?
first film they was
In the
talking
first
about like,
film.
oh yeah, if I'm lucky, Tori Spelling will play me or some shit like that, where it
Yeah.
was a joke like Tori Spelling's ugly or whatever. But then they actually get her to play her in the Stab movies. I think it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Like, there's just another layer for me why I like this better. I think they're brilliant in the way they layer that in. So
Also, shout out to Tori Spelling for actually doing that, because obviously her role is kind of the butt of the joke. Because the whole joke was that Tori Spelling is, not a great actress, not very attractive. So, the fact that she would actually come in and do that for the joke is very commendable.
For sure.
friend of the podcast, Tori Spelling.
Friend of the podcast. We'll get Tori on sometime. Cool. Well, look, we'll move on to Scream 3, which came out a couple of years later in the year 2000, once again directed by Wes Craven, with the synopsis, which is: as bodies begin dropping around the set of Stab 3, a movie sequel based on the gruesome Woodsboro killings, Sidney, Gale, and Dewey are once again drawn into a game of horror movie mayhem. So I want to provide a bit of context for Scream 3, because Scream 3 is bad. I think we're all going to agree that Scream 3 is bad.
No.
So I just want to just provide a little bit of context about the film that might kind of help explain, why it is what it is. So after Scream 2, which was also, as we said, a massive hit, a lot of the cast started getting a lot more work. Even though they were all pretty successful TV actors, they started getting a lot more work across the board, which meant they weren't as available as they would like. Hence why Neve Campbell's role is a little bit more subdued in this film, because she was just busy. But also, crucially, probably the most important part is that Kevin Williamson became incredibly busy. So he wasn't able to write the script for this film, and this is definitely the major failing. So they got another guy in to write the script, who apparently just took some basic ideas that Williamson had jotted down when he originally pitched Scream to the studios as a trilogy, but the original idea wasn't used. And the original idea, if we are to believe Matthew Lillard, because it's never been officially confirmed, but if we were to believe Matthew Lillard, the original idea for Scream 3 was that Stu survived Scream 1 and was orchestrating a new sort of cult of Ghostface, of which are made up of high school students, and he's sort of orchestrating that from prison. That is apparently what Scream 3 was supposed to be about, and it was about to go into production when Columbine happened. So the idea of having murderers, high school students as murderers, was obviously not going to fly, and is also a major reason why there's such a huge tonal shift in this movie, in terms of violence and the more leaning into the goofy, sort of heavy-handed, I suppose, comedy we'll call it. It's not very funny, but they're certainly trying to lean more into that, as opposed to being less serious than the first two. So there's a huge tonal shift. The script wasn't written by Kevin Williamson. A lot of the cast were busy, and they couldn't really make the film they wanted to make. And from what I was reading, especially, and this is majorly more so down to Columbine, it was even said that the studio execs didn't want any violence at all. And that's when Wes Craven kind of put his foot down and said, look, we can make a Scream movie, or we can make a different movie and not call it Scream. And that's when they kind of gave into, having the film as it is. Now, as I said, the film, in my opinion, is bad. Maybe you guys will think different. I think this is a bad movie. But I do just want to just name some positive things, or some interesting things, I guess, before we all shit on it. Parker Posey is the best thing about this movie, in my opinion.
No.
Yes, Parker Posey
I
is
agree.
fucking awesome as Jennifer
No.
Jolie. Yes, Parker Posey rocks. She's the best sort of part of this movie, in my opinion. I think she's great anyway. I hope she comes back in the future, in a future sequel, because she deserves it. And I think this is the reason you mentioned earlier, before we started recording, Chris, regarding its They Shoot Pictures ranking. And I think a lot of that is going to be because of retroactive reviews, due to the subplot around Hollywood producers abusing up and coming actresses, and there's like a lot of jokes about that in the movie as well.
And
This
Harvey
film-
Weinstein produced it.
Yes,
Yep.
Harvey Weinstein fucking produced it. Yeah. This film got a lot of there was a lot of sort of retroactive, I can't think of the word, reappraisal of this film after the Me Too movement. And I think that's why it's maybe pushed up that they shoot pictures. That's the only logical reason I can think of. Now, I do think there's a knock-on problem with this, and that, yeah, it's really interesting that they talked about this, but then also at the same time, the series continues to slut shame Maureen Prescott and blame everything on her. So it's kind of, there's two sides to this coin, really. Yeah, it's cool that they brought it up, but also at the same time, they're still slut shaming and victim blaming a woman for everything that happens in these movies. So yeah, it's not all great. But yeah, I just wanted to point those two things out before we go shit on the movie. So who wants to jump in first? I guess I'll let someone else. Someone can just jump in if they want.
Mine is short, so I will go. The most iconic thing about this film, and it's the best part of it, is Ghostface showing his bulletproof vest. That's all that's great in this movie. The rest of it, I don't care about. That's just cool.
Okay.
Great, go ahead if you want to. I'll end with kind of where it sits and everything.
Okay, so I like this film.
You crazy son of a bitch.
I know. Listen. Okay, I get it. The violence is lesser. I'm not even going to get into the reveal right now. Courtney Cox's hair is an atrocity, and
Awful.
the truest victim of this movie. We don't get much of the returning cast. I get it. I understand. There's no Kevin Williamson. I get it. However, the movie Fox, it's a good movie. Okay. First of all, the Randy videotape, spectacular. Such a beautiful way to bring Randy back without just resurrecting him from the dead. I appreciated it so much, it made me feel nice. I also like that it introduces his sister, because that gives us a little bit of Randy moving forward, so we actually get more of him in the sequel, like especially the legacy sequels, because his nieces and nephews are in those films. I think it was just nice to add an extra familial layer to Randy, so even when he's there, his character is being fleshed out a little bit. I think Nev Campbell is still very strong as Sydney in this film. David Arquette and Courtney Cox's chemistry, I think, is at their best in this movie. And the final resolution with them coming together is very beautiful, and I love that. The final shot of Sydney being able to leave the door open, and not feel that pressure or that intensity, the scare, the fear, whatever, is gorgeous. They could have, if they left the franchise there, it would have been a very fine ending. As Zach said, the bulletproof vest, it's just cool. I like the whole idea of them bringing it to a set of the Stab movies. I don't know. I like, and yeah, Parker Posey. Parker Posey is great. Also, the gasoline thing in the house where the house blows up. Beautiful. I don't care. It was so good. I enjoyed that so much. And also, doesn't this film has what's that guy's name? I forgot his name.
Lance
Patrick
Hendrickson?
Warburton. No,
I was wrong
Patrick
person.
Warburton. Yeah, I love that. I just like him showing up. He's a guy that just makes me happy. He's in a film. I like it a little bit. And yeah, I just think it's great. Also, yes, the whole commentary on Hollywood producers being very abusive to the actresses. I think having Harvey Weinstein produce this actually makes that point even more poignant. The fact that they're able to kind of wave that in his face, because it's not like he can say no, we can't make this movie, because what's he gonna say? So brilliant. And also, I feel like when you said it feels hypocritical because the series is slut shaming Marine Prescott and stuff. I disagree, because the only people that really do that are the villains. You know, the people that are wrong. You never see Nev Campbell. You never see Sydney do that. You see Gail Weathers do it pretty much in the first movie, but that's part of her character arc, is that she comes full circle to that. The only people that ever really shame her for doing any of that are the bad guys. So I feel like the film is actually very much anti the slut shaming. But yeah, I like this movie. I don't
And
think
when-
it's a masterpiece, but I do like it a lot.
And I just to add on to fairness to Gail, she is kind of in her own way helping the defense of Cotton Weary. His best defense is Maureen Prescott is a slut, and
Yeah.
it didn't mean he killed her. Like, not right, but as far as a guy who didn't do anything technically wrong, that's his best defense. So
Yeah.
it sucks.
Yeah, so the world generally disagrees with this being a good movie. But it ranks it higher than Scream 2, which I think
That
is
is
fascinating.
crack.
I know. So horror movie wise, this is much lower on the list. It is in the top 1000. It's down at 723. Yeah, I agree. They shoot pictures. It's at 8013. So again, not like it's beloved. It's next to Godzilla versus Hedorah, which is the most drug-induced Godzilla movie possible. The giant trash monster. And the Japanese hippies. But I think there's a couple things that I did like about it, just to be nice. I love the fact that Roger Corman came in as a producer. That made my heart smile.
Yeah, I spotted him, and this is the first time I spotted him. I didn't actually catch him any time previously watching Scream 3. And I was like, that dude looks so familiar. Who is this guy? And I looked at the cast like, oh shit, it's Roger Corman. That's wild.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing because, he made most of the sexploitation movies of the 60s and 70s, right? But there's no accusations against him. Like, he was always very respectful to his actors. And he had a formula. So if that's a whole nother interview we want, or a whole nother podcast we don't have to get into now. But Corman's a fascinating guy because he was like a business person through and through, right? So it's like, okay, it needs to have this many seconds of nudity and it needs to have this many seconds of violence, and then he would give it to the writers and he would say, if it has these things, you can go do what you want. So he really encouraged creativity, but he also knew how to get movies sold. So anyways, fascinating character. And I like that he plays the producer in this. I will give half a star extra to anything that has Lance Henriksen in it, just on
Mhm.
principle. I think he makes everything better. One of the most underrated
I agree.
actors.
Yeah.
He's just so awesome. Just another random plug for anybody to go watch Bacurau if you have not. I just get to see full Henriksen. But yeah, this movie's horrible. Like, I think I hated it. Like, sorry, y'all. I hated Parker
Don't be
Posey's
sorry.
character. She's
No,
so
okay, be
annoying.
sorry about that.
Yeah, she's so obnoxious. And I love Parker Posey. She was one of my first crushes. And it made me cringe to see her in this. It's like it's like they saw her in Wet Hot American Summer, even though that came out later, I know. It's as if they saw her and they were like, okay, do that again. But I just, she's such a brilliant comedian, and so just amazing as an actor. My soul was just sad for her watching this, just have to take a paycheck. The writing in this movie is just horrendous with her, I think. And so, sorry, I don't agree on that, but there's not really that much it's redeemable. I think the thing I mostly hate about this movie was it felt lazy, like they Scream 2 like built up the world in a very beautiful way, I think in a very interesting way. And then this movie just stuck with like that base level of what a Scream movie could be, and like didn't push it or grow it or anything. It just kind of started to kill it. So I'm very happy to hear that Scream 4 gets better, because this was the only movie in the first three that we saw that I felt was a drag. Like, I checked my watch a lot.
For me anyway, like this is like bottom of the, this is like much worse than any other Scream film. Like this is the only one I don't hate it, I'll watch it, it's fine, but it's the only one I don't like. I love every other Scream movie apart from this one. Basically, I just have different levels of love for all the rest of them apart from this one.
Mhm.
And then for me, I just think the writing is just so bad. We can point out little things that happen throughout the film and say this was cool, that was cool, this was cool. But as like an entire product, the writing is so bad. It like doesn't know what it wants to be or what it wants to do. It feels like the film doesn't even know who the killer is, and then they get to the end, they're like, ah shit, we need a killer. Let's try and figure that out, because there's no sense of build-up or intrigue or anything really in the same way that there is with the other two films.
Totally
It's like
agree.
they got like halfway through and they're like, shit, we haven't figured out who the killer is. Who's it going to be? And that fucking voice changer is the dumbest thing in the
It's so
whole
bad.
entire
Gosh.
franchise. It is so awful that I'm so glad that, and you'll be glad to hear, Chris, they never bring it back.
Good.
It is the dumbest thing. Give us full unfiltered Roger Jackson, because he's not good now. I had to make sure he was still like credited as the Ghostface voice, because I was like, this is terrible. This is not anywhere near as good as what he normally is. When they do eventually do the Ghostface voice, I had to double check to make sure he was still in the cast. Because that voice changer is terrible. The whole killer reveal is awful, pure jumping the shark bullshit. I'm sorry. I just, it's fine. I'll sit through it, whatever. But I can't sit here and say it's a good movie by any stretch.
Just to,
Oh, go on.
oh no, I was just going to note, since we're talking about Roger Jackson, Chris, you might find this interesting because I'm going to assume both of you guys know this. I just think it's a fun thing, and it's more fun than talking about this movie. Roger Jackson was the just supposed to be a temporary voice in the first one until they figured out a better voice, and they never found one. And now he's gotten to keep a job for like, what is it, almost 30 years now. So
Oh,
I think
cool.
that's cool. And he's also Mojo Jojo and Powerpuff Girls.
Fuck off.
He is. He
Oh
is.
my god. That's awesome. Anyway, Craig, you were going to say something before Zach.
Yeah,
really
I was gonna
interrupted you.
say I do love this film. Well, love it. Okay, loves. Yeah, it depends on the day. I like or love it, but the one thing that never changes is, okay, I don't hate the reveal. I don't hate it. It's fine. I don't hate who it is. I don't hate his past, his backstory. That's all fine. Cool, whatever. What I do thoroughly despise, though, is how it retroactively makes the first film worse.
Oh God, yeah, that
Because
Roman direct, yeah, it's awful.
yeah, I hate the idea that Roman was the one that forced, persuaded Billy into killing Maureen Prescott and going on his whole thing. It takes so much away from Billy as a person, as a character, as a killer. Because his motivations become basically null. It tries to render Billy into what Stu is, which I feel like is improper. It's not nice. We had such a perfect machine in Scream, and for this very lesser film, I will admit, a very lesser film, to try and retroactively change that film is blasphemy. And I do hate that. And in my head, I just ignore that in the canon. I just ignore that Roman was allegedly behind the whole Billy killer turn, whatever.
Well, that's kind of like
Sorry.
No, I was gonna say that's kind of like, when I watch the first Halloween movie, I don't sit there and think, oh yeah, that's Michael's sister, because
no.
it's not relevant for that movie, and two, it makes the movie worse. So I feel like the same thing there. When I watch Scream 1, I'm not thinking that, oh man, Roman's in the background here, like, forcing all this to happen. It doesn't even like cross my mind until I get to Scream 3 and like, oh right, that's a thing.
Yeah, no, I despise that so much.
Yeah.
If that wasn't in this movie, I actually wouldn't even think the movie was half as bad as I do think it is. That does sour the movie a lot for me.
There's a line in Scream 4 which I won't give the context around because Chris hasn't seen it yet. But there's a line in Scream 4 which is "Don't fuck with the original," and that's what this film does. And it's just you can't do it. You shouldn't fuck with the original.
There's maybe we can just briefly shit on the name Aaron Kruger, the writer of this movie, because I was just pulling him up out of curiosity. And he's just had a horrible career. It's shocking that he still gets jobs. But Adam, I mean, I'm sorry, Zach, I don't know how far Alexandria, Virginia is from you, but that's where he's
About
from.
4 hours. Yeah, it's a garbage place, so it doesn't surprise me.
Garbage place that produces
Yeah.
garbage writers.
Exactly.
So he went on to write Reindeer Games. The Ring remakes, which I know you like, Zach. So I won't say too much about
the
that.
Ring remake is fantastic. You're on
And
crack.
Crit, you like it as well. Okay, I won't say too much about that. That might be his exception. The Brothers Grimm, which was, I wanted it to be good, but it was just awful. 3 Transformers movies.
Which ones?
Does it matter?
If it is Dark of the Moon one of them,
Yes.
then null point. Dark of the Moon is fantastic.
All right. Fair enough. Revenge of the Fallen and Age of Extinction are the other 2.
My
Ghost in the
favorite
Shell.
James Cameron movies.
Thank you.
I fucking hate you so much.
I love you for that. Ghost in the Shell remake, and then recently Top Gun Maverick.
That film was good. Top
Yeah,
Gun
no, so
Maverick's
he has a
better.
dotted career. I wouldn't say
Very
he's
dotted,
horrible
yeah.
though.
Top Gun Maverick's better than the first one.
Yeah, Top Gun Maverick, the Ring remake, Transformers Dark of the Moon. He's got some hits.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, we won't get into
He's probably better. I think he needs the right director with him. A lot of times, like Gore Verbinski is what makes the Ring remake so good. Like the writing's fine, but it's
God, I love
it's really the style of the movie that's just like so good for the remake.
Also, granted, they had very decent source material to work from.
Yeah, it's not like it was his story.
Yeah,
that
he
had
didn't
come
have to
up
do a
with.
lot of heavy lifting in the story department.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like saying The Departed is better than Infernal Affairs or something. Like
It
maybe,
is.
but
It is better.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah,
Hold on.
like
Before
originals are not just like better than remakes just by default. That's
No, I'm just
crazy.
saying that we can't give the writing too much credit.
Oh, yeah,
when
yeah,
he does
exactly.
have such a
Completely agree.
fantastic film already to
Exactly.
remake.
I agree.
No one
Any-
watches the remake of 12 Angry Men and goes, "Wow, this storyline's so great. Let's credit the writer." No one really does that.
Mhm.
Right. Any final thoughts on Scream 3 before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have one, and I really just want to go back to Crit talking about the videotape with Randy. I actually think the idea is good. This is kind of sums up the movie. The general idea is good. The execution's where it fails. So the idea of Randy creating a videotape in case it happens again, you're really doing weird with the timeline of 2, but I can buy it. I think it's in his character. The part where it fails, I think, and we think of Scream as this meta horror franchise. He starts talking about trilogies, and he can't name a horror trilogy because horror movies aren't made that way. So the whole thing just falls flat on its face, and he can't even really name any trilogies that follow these rules. It's just like, sure, we'll just go with it, I guess. Like
Yeah,
it
just
doesn't
take his word
really
for
make
it.
sense.
And the only reason that they even have that scene is because what I mentioned earlier about fans being pissed off about Randy being killed off. They wanted to like bring him back to like the producers realized they fucked up. They're like, shit, we need to bring him back. So they had actually originally toyed with the idea of him actually surviving Scream 2, which I'm glad that they didn't do that at least.
Yeah, no, that would have been awful.
So they had toyed with that he had survived and he had been like sort of in hiding, recuperating for the last couple of years or whatever. So I'm glad they didn't do that. So that's why they even have this. It's just to kind of say, look, we're sorry. Here's Randy. Here he is. We're sorry for doing that to him. So yeah, that's it's kind of you'd almost prefer they didn't do it at all, because the only reason they're doing it is because it's kind of more of an apology to fans more than actually having narrative purpose. And again, just to kind of bring up his sister, because it'd be weird if we had an episode of They Live by Film where we don't talk about Radiance films, because his sister is played by the main actor in
Yeah.
Welcome to the Dollhouse. So it'd just be weird if I didn't bring up Radiance films once in an episode.
I was about to say the same thing. Zach, I think you helped solidify something for me too, because I think this is exactly the problem I have with 3. The idea that Sydney's a crisis counselor, fine. Like whatever, right? You can make that, you can write that into the movie if you want, that's fine. I don't think that in itself takes anything away. But those scenes suck so bad. Like the way they're shot, the writing in them, like I hate them. And I don't.
Yeah, the question was if she was even going to be able to do it. So they wrote it. I think you kind of touched on this, Adam, that they wrote it in a way in case they couldn't use Sydney, and it's so obvious once you know that fact. Like
Okay.
it's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Missed opportunities.
Awesome.
So we're, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's been fun. Been fun to discuss these films. Especially fun hearing your thoughts, Chris, as somebody who's only seen the first one before, and this is your kind of first time dipping your toes into the sequels. As we mentioned in that Ozploitation episode, next time out we are going to be talking about the next 3 films in the Scream cycle. So Scream 4, Scream, 5, and then Scream 6. So that episode's going to be out directly the week after you're hearing this episode. So obviously it kind of goes without saying when we're talking about these movies, we are going to be spoiling them, as part of our discussion. So like I said, knowing who the killer is in a Scream film is sacred information. So if you want to make sure that you are not going to have those films spoiled, please watch them in the meantime, if you don't want them spoiled on you. But for now, guys, it's been great having you on. Crit, it's been great having you with us. Hopefully you'll be able to join us next time as well.
I should be able to, yes.
Awesome. Perfect. And we'll wrap up from here.
Yeah, thanks, Crit. And even if we disagree slightly on some points, I love hearing your voice, and you've given me some great stuff to think about. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I liked talking about Scream. So yeah.
Good.